President Biden flew to Arizona today on a plane. And if you thought that meant he was finally visiting the border, you'd be wrong. Watch what happened when Fox News' Peter Doocy asked the president why he was so close yet so far.
Why go to a border state and not visit the border? There's more important things going on.
Texas Republican Congressman Chip Roy had some sharp words in response.
Well, how the hell would he know? He hasn't been there. And it sure is something that's pretty critically important to the people of Texas and, frankly, to the immigrants that are getting abused and dying, 53 in a tractor trailer in San Antonio, getting raped in stash houses in South Texas. Or how about the 72,000 people who died from fentanyl last year? The moms that I have to talk to every day who's lost a loved one because fentanyl's pouring into our border because he refuses to secure the southern border.
Wow, Roy bringing it once again. So why won't the president visit the border of the country he runs? Is it because he's afraid of what he might find? Joining me now in the studio, Spectator editor-at-large and Fox News contributor Ben Domenech. Ben, I don't know what you're going to say, but I assume it's going to be something about the fact that I don't think he really cares. When Peter Doocy asked him, he said, we have bigger things to think about.
You know, I think that one of the things, unfortunately, that he's taken away from this election, from this outcome in the midterms, something that I think a lot of Democrats in Washington are taking away as well, is that they can continue to ignore what's going on at the border without any real ramifications. Now, I think that for border state Democrats who are up in 2024, that's not true. You know, you see the Senate races that are going to be up in Arizona and New Mexico, for instance.
Yeah.
Those are senators who actually do know that there's going to be political damage for them if this is a White House that continues to ignore this problem. But unfortunately, at this moment, Joe Biden feels like, hey, I've been ignoring this for 2 years. We've seen Mayorkas completely botch this. We've seen people on the left and the right, come after him and ask him to actually do his job. And the fact that he's not doing his job well and that he's executing it so poorly has not redounded in any way to hurt me politically. So he feels like he can get away with it.
Yeah. And what about Democrats? They have to give lip service. But, with Mark Kelly, so he said, oh, there's a problem at the border. And the press give him credit. They grade him on a curve. Yeah. If they just acknowledge that there's a problem, they treat him like they're tough on the border. But Kelly's not tough on the border.
No. It's like saying that there's a problem with fentanyl in America. Everyone admits that there's a problem with fentanyl in America. But then what are you going to do about it? And the problem that, as I see it, is Republicans at this moment are in a real crisis because they need to be able to deliver on their promises to the American people when it came to securing the border, but they're not going to be able to have the Senate helping them in this way after this midterm. And so because of that, it's going to be a lot of investigations into what went on. It's going to be a lot of pressure campaigns from the House. It's going to probably be an attempt to impeach Mayorkas that will likely go nowhere. But they really don't have the capability to make this White House do anything different. Instead, what you're going to hear from the Democrats is the same old lip service to the idea of comprehensive immigration reform, which is impossible until we actually enforce the laws that we have on the books and secure the border.
Well, yeah, Carol Markowitz mentioned in the last segment, she said, Charles Schumer came out and he said, it's time to make them all legal. So they're really going for it. And I also hear Republicans. I mean, not just people who classify themselves as liberal Republicans, but they say, well, we do have to do comprehensive reform. So, but with the voters, especially the base voters, that is a complete no-no.
It's a non-starter. And one of the reasons that it's a non-starter is because voters don't trust Washington to do anything on this because it's been so long. And the nature of the problem has changed. Because a lot of these same politicians who were around in the early 2000s when they were talking about guest worker bills and things like that, they were much more open to doing something. But now we have a different problem. We have a human trafficking problem, a cartel-driven problem, a problem of fentanyl flowing across in ways that is absolutely murdering American citizens. It's a completely different problem than what the old ways were under the George W. Bush era of people just wanting to cross back and forth in order to do migrant jobs. That, I think, is a problem that this crew of people in Washington are never going to fix because they are stuck in the old ways of doing things. And for the sake of Democrats in particular, they are not interested in dealing with this problem.
Do you think, for credibility's sake, should Republicans do the hearings and do all the, there's a lot of people who want that. They want to see blood. I want them to extract their pound of flesh over COVID and also in a lot of the other shenanigans that went on. But if they get bogged down in just doing the hearings, instead of really taking action, is that going to cause a problem with Republicans?
One of the big problems here that we have in Washington is that you have a bureaucracy that has become so powerful that they make all the decisions within that executive branch under the auspices of laws passed by previous Congresses. So what does that mean? It means that the members of Congress, all they can really do is yell and complain and make for sound bites on, in hearings and that kind of thing, being critical of people, but they can't actually move the ball on any of this. And that's not going to change, I believe, until we have generational change in leadership in Washington that actually deals with the problem, is much closer to it, understands its importance to communities across the country, and understands that fentanyl is not going away as a continuing crisis in America.
Yep. Well, Ben, well said. Thanks a lot.
Good to be with you.